Wednesday, everyone, and welcome into this community update. It being Wednesday, we're going to be talking with the host of Truck Tech, the podcast, newsletter, and show, Alan Adler. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to see you, Isaiah, as always.
Yeah, glad to have you here, Alan. And a little bit of an emotional feel to start out this week's Truck Tech episode. There's a lot going on in Israel right now, and it's a story of life and business during this wartime. What is your impression of everything that's happening right now?
Well, I think first you have to understand that there are businesses, and a lot of tech businesses that come out of Tel Aviv and come out of Israel. And one of them that we've been following for quite some time is automotive. They are different in that the powertrain that they have developed is what's called a by-wire system. That means that there's no mechanical connections. Everything is done with software and with sensors. So you're steering, you may feel like you're turning the steering wheel, but actually you're reacting to a sensor doing that. And the same with braking and things like that. So it is a breakthrough technology that, started out in the SPAC world, right? I mean, that was the only place to raise money as Daniel Barel, who's the CEO and co-founder of tells us in today's episode, is that we went SPAC because that was the only place we could get any money. Well, a lot of SPACs, as we know and have chronicled, have gone under. They've run out of money and they just weren't able to get any more. Is different in that it recently raised $45 million through a direct offering of its stock to a supplier that is basically handling its entire supply chain. They are contract manufacturing everything through Roush in Detroit. So they'll build the actual vehicles, whereas itself handles the building of what's called the REcorner powertrain in England, and then ultimately will build them in Austin, Texas here. But has gone about this really on a shoestring to this point, using all these other suppliers to get their business into shape so that they can scale it, profitably from the beginning. They're not building a bunch of plants. They're not putting a lot of money into things that, basically would just delay their progress. Rather, they're having people that know what they're doing, put together the vehicles for them. And what that's done is it's allowed them to build a book of about $60 million of orders for these powertrains and ultimately trucks, as of the second quarter this year. So they have an order book, they've got a supply chain management thing, and they've also got someone to manufacture their vehicles. So they're really in terrific shape that way. The emotional part of this, Isaiah, comes in because Daniel Barel lives in Tel Aviv and lives in Israel and has seen many of his people in his business have been called into the military 2 and 3 times for tours of duty, and is literally living, with shelling nearby now. I mean, he said that, that a shell exploded 40 kilometers from his home, that they had a situation where his 92-year-old grandmother had to be moved when they had a emergency drill and things like that. So they're living with some really, it's life during wartime. I think it was the Talking Heads who talked about that, but that was just a song. This is real life. And I think what Daniel and his team are going through is really extraordinary.
Yeah. And sorry, my ears are falling out real quick. This in Israel, I mean, they've been dealing with this conflict, this war with Palestine for, I believe, almost a year now. Hamas launched their attack on October 7th of 2023. And it just doesn't also seem like there's any sign of this conflict resolving in the near future. So I'm just wondering how that's going to continue to impact and their business.
Well, I think, the adaptability, they've had a lot of business conducted in bomb shelters. Honestly, they've had to go underground, into safe areas. People brought laptops down and continued to work and things like that as needed. But Daniel, when you listen to him, he's not looking for pity or anything. He accepts this as part of life. I mean, if you think about living in a country where all of your neighbors or most of your neighbors' entire idea is destroying you, that is a very difficult way to live. But he knows it. He grew up there. This is his reality. So I guess it's sort of like you live with what you know. But I did want to ask him, because I've talked to him in the past, since the October 7th invasion or attack. And that was in the early days when we caught up this time, he had obviously more stories to tell about that. I didn't want to pander, so we didn't make the episode about that because they've had a lot of really good advancement in the business. So we focused more on that. But I think the backdrop of what he's living through and what his company is living through is really important. And it's a pretty poignant story, really, for this afternoon's Truck Tech.
And Alan, how does Reed plan to scale their business going forward?
Well, as we talked about, getting a Motherson, which is an Indian company, which actually has, 400 operations around the world and, deals with all aspects of the supply chain and will manage supply chain for RE, and then having a contract manufacturer lined up to build the vehicles. RE is not on the hook for a lot of things that a lot of companies, try to do. If you think of some others along the way, Arrive comes to mind. Arrival was the name of it. They were going to build a bunch of factories and they ran out of money. They couldn't build the factories. So the business has kind of, gone away at this point. But we always thought the best way to do this was to not have a lot of investment hanging out there that they couldn't recoup, basically, and that they had to make a lot of promises that they couldn't fulfill. Now what they're able to do is point to these, established relationships and investment really now in the business to say, look, we can scale and we can grow this business, but we don't have to, do a lot of the, in the ground kind of work. And of course, they're not going to build factories to make trucks. They're going to have a contract manufacturer do it. And, they're not having to go out and try to, buy tens and twenties of certain items that would cost a fortune if you bought them yourself. But by hooking into a large supply chain organization, that can just be part of what that business does. So what they've done is look at taking the technology and getting it to market as cleanly and I think as profitably as possible. When they did their second quarter earnings report in late September, Isaiah, they essentially, had reduced their cash burn tremendously, about 20%, and their loss was down about 59%. Now, that still means you have a loss-making company, but that's not surprising for a startup. And it's something that, ideally, I have not heard, and I didn't even ask Daniel, I should have, when sort of that, gross margin becomes a factor and they can actually show real progress towards profitability. But they've got a lot of big customers and they've got a lot of testing of their vehicles out there, and they continue to bring in orders. So I think it's one of the companies, and we don't like to make a lot of predictions, but it's one of these startups that at least has a path to survivability, because so many, as we talked about, haven't been able to make it.
Yeah, that's true, Alan. Hopefully that they can continue to put their best foot forward and continue to scale their company, like you said. Alan, we got a new episode of Truck Tech coming out later today. Can you give us a little preview of what people can expect on today's episode?
Well, that's where we're going to talk to Daniel Barel on today's episode. But Friday, we'll also have a Truck Tech short video that we did this week with another startup that's actually having some success. And we can't talk about specifics here on Wednesday, but we will have an update with this company that has succeeded again on the finance capital raising side of things. So I guess I really can't say too much about them since it's just Wednesday, but watch for that in Friday's Truck Tech newsletter. It will be an interview with the CEO of that company. We'll also be talking about some of the companies that we've been tracking, like Hyzon, having its first dozen refuse trucks equipped with fuel cells coming out now. That's interesting because years ago, that was going to be one of the ways that Nikola was going to make it. They had a deal with Republic Industries about doing fuel cell refuse trucks. That fell apart, but now you actually have it as one of the use cases that makes a lot of sense for fuel cells. And so Hyzon will be equipping some vehicles for New Way and with these fuel cell technology in I think the San Jose, California area. So we're seeing dribs and drabs from these companies. The growth is not exponential, but it does suggest that there may be a future for some of these technologies.
And Alan, if people want to check out that newsletter or the show or the short, how can they do that?
Okay, well, the show today, you can watch it. It streams at 3 p.m. Eastern on the FreightWaves YouTube channel under Truck Tech. in FreightWaves. Then under Truck Tech, it also will live there on the playlist after the show airs. And then Friday's newsletter is 11 o'clock Eastern, both for subscribers. They will get an email and it posts on the FreightWaves website. So that's available there. And you can sign up to subscribe at the FreightWaves homepage if you want to do that.
Alan, as always, it is a pleasure being able to talk with you each and every Wednesday to get this update on Truck Tech. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will check in with you next week.
All right. Thank you, Isaiah.